Welcome to today's webinar, Recast Your City, How to Save Your Downtown with Small-Scale Manufacturing, hosted by the Maryland Department of Planning in association with the Smart Growth Network. My name is Michael Bayer. I'm the Manager of Infrastructure and Development at the Maryland Department of Planning and Project Manager for the Smart Growth Information Clearinghouse. The Smart Growth Information Clearinghouse is a project of the Smart Growth Network, supported by the US EPA's Office of Community Revitalization and managed by the Maryland Department of Planning. In addition to hosting webinars, the Smart Growth Information Clearinghouse has a website at smartgrowth.org that provides information on effective growth, development, and preservation practices. The website provides information about events, funding opportunities, awards, and resources to help local decision makers foster healthy, resilient, and economically vibrant communities. The Clearinghouse is the virtual home of the Smart Growth Network, a nationally recognized coalition of leadership organizations that have formally endorsed the principles of smart growth. This webinar is one in a series of webinars produced by the Maryland Department of Planning on smart growth and planning topics, available for viewing at smartgrowth.org. We are recording this webinar and will be posting it on our website under the Webinar Archives tab. We encourage you to visit the website and to subscribe to our e-newsletter to learn about our upcoming webinars. You can also find out about planning initiatives, planning tools, and educational opportunities in Maryland by visiting the Maryland Department of Planning's website at planning.maryland.gov. The views expressed by the speaker in this webinar are those of the speaker and not necessarily of the Maryland Department of Planning or the state of Maryland. Viewers of this live event are eligible to receive 1.5 CM credits from the American Planning Association and 1.5 CNUA CEU self-reported credits from the Congress for the New Urbanism. To log your AICP credits, visit the American Planning Association's website at planning.org, log into your account, and search for the name of today's event, which is Recast Your City, How to Save Your Downtown with Small-Scale Manufacturing. You can also search for event number 922-3782. I'd like to acknowledge our webinar partner today, Ilana Preuss, and their partnerships manager, Jen Hawes. Founded in 1984, Ilana Preuss's mission is to provide the best ideas and information to those seeking to understand and protect the environment and to create solutions to its complex problems. So today we welcome back Ilana Preuss. Ilana is the founder and CEO of Recast City LLC, a consulting firm that works with real estate developers, city, and other civic leaders to integrate manufacturing space for small-scale producers into redevelopment projects and place-based economic development. In her national practice, Ilana works with real estate developers, foundations, city planning, and economic development offices. With mayors, she develops demand analyses, economic development strategies, and business retention and planning policies. Her technique of intensive one-on-one engagement with local business owners and other stakeholders provides clients with a deep understanding of local challenges and opportunities for success. She has a Bachelor of Arts degree in urban planning from Cornell University and a Master's of City Planning from the University of Maryland. Following her presentation, Ilana will answer as many questions as time permits. You can always submit a question anytime by using the questions tool located in the control panel on the right side of your screen, and we'll ask them of her in the last half an hour or so of our presentation today. And as usual, we're going to start with some polls to find out where everybody is joining us from, first of all. So if you see on your screen, there's a question about where you live and work. We just want to gather that information that we can share with Ilana, and also for folks today, you can see where everybody is visiting from. If you're having trouble responding to the survey, you may need to exit full screen mode so that you can click on one of these options. And we'll leave all of these polls up for a few seconds to give everybody a chance to respond. And we can see the response coming in. It's always interesting to see where people are from and the variance. I'm sure many of you have been with us before and have answered this question before. We don't always have the same audience, so it's interesting to see where people are from. So today, 37% of our audience is from the Mid-Atlantic or Northeast, 24% Midwest, 19% in the South, 12% in the West, and we have 8% international today. So Ilana, you are reaching people all over the globe. Next question here is, which field do you work in or mostly work in? And you have one of 5 responses to select: planning, economic development, real estate development, architecture, or other. So we'll give you all a chance to respond to that as well. It's a planning agency. Most of our audience is often planners, and it looks like that's the case as well today, but it's always interesting to see who else is with us, as you are a self-selected audience, so thank you for being with us today. And again, we'll give you a couple more seconds to respond and share this. And interesting to see the response, which you'll see momentarily. So today, 2/3 of our audience is actually in planning. 66% are planners, 13% are in economic development, 3% real estate, 18% other, and nobody is claiming to be an architect today, interestingly enough. Okay, our next poll here, 3rd of 4. What type of organization do you work in? And your options here: local government, private sector, nonprofit, state or federal government, and other. So again, we'll give you maybe another 25, 30 seconds to respond. You can see the responses coming in. We'll have one more question after this, and then we'll turn it over to Ilana for her presentation. And again, thank you for responding to this. It's been interesting to see where everybody's from. Give you a couple more seconds, and you can see what the responses are. So 53% are in local government today, 20% private sector, 12% in state or federal, 10% nonprofit, and 6% other. Okay, one last question. Okay, downtown is important to my work because, and here you can check all that apply. We need more sales tax revenue. It makes us competitive as a place to live and work. It's the soul of our community. Vacancies push away other businesses and potential residents. And finally, our current residents deserve a great downtown. And you can respond to as many of these that apply to you. So I'm sure Ilana will be interested in seeing what you say. So a couple more seconds for people to respond. We'll share and then move into the presentation. And looks like more than half of you, 2/3, have responded, so we'll close it momentarily. And so here, 74% say our current residents deserve a great downtown. 72% it makes it competitive. It's a great place to live and work. 63% is the soul of our community. 48% of vacancies push away other businesses. And finally, 29% said we need more sales tax revenue. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ilana Preuss. Welcome, Ilana, and welcome back.
Hi, can you guys hear me? I think
Yes.
My mute has come off. Okay. Just gonna get my screen together. Great to be here with everybody today. I'm excited to have this conversation with you. And if my computer decides that it really wants to play nice, it will even work. Okay, so welcome everybody. It is great to be here with you this afternoon, or for those of you where it might be morning still. I will say good afternoon and good morning to all of you, because I know you're coming in from many, many different time zones, and it's still pretty early on this Friday in October. The conversation I want to have with you today, and I really do always see this as a conversation, as you heard before, please feel free to post questions along the way, and we'll get through as many of them as we can at the end, but feel free to post them whenever you want. The conversation I want to have today is really about what does it mean to save your downtown, right? I wrote a book, it's called How to Save Your Downtown with Small Scale Manufacturing, but I think it's really important to take that step back and talk about or think about what does it mean to save our downtowns, right? Because we have places in our downtowns that in many ways reflect the personality of who we are, reflect the personality of the businesses and the business owners in our community. But we also have places in our downtowns that represent our history of neglect, our history of exclusion, our history of some economic development and planning decisions, I'll say from the days of yore to give all of us present today a nod towards doing better, but decisions that are unfortunately still happening today in a lot of places that really do neglect our downtowns, that really make it much harder to create a place that people love and to save that heart of our community. And I think it's important to think about why our downtowns are struggling and why this is a challenge that we're facing today, because we know that the town square is not only beloved today, but a beloved part of our history in small towns around the country and in bigger cities as well. Having a neighborhood center and having a place where people can come together and having that opportunity to run into friends or family or neighbors just because you both happen to be there. And the challenge that we're facing today, and this is very much of today, is that we had challenges of the change in retail going into the pandemic. And then the pandemic, as you all well know, really threw everything even more out of whack. And so that the number of vacancies that we're seeing in our neighborhood main streets, in our downtowns, big city and small town, the vacancies have gone through the roof in a lot of places. And so we have a lot of places that are struggling. Just briefly, my story for those of you on here who don't know me yet. My name is Ilana Preuss, and I am the founder and CEO of Recast City. I have a long history in the smart growth world. In the picture on the left, this was high school. At one point I had short hair. It's an amazing electric blue dress my mother sewed. She knit, she sewed, she painted. She also knew how to use a drill and taught us all how to measure 3 times and hang blinds. And then, in fact, and now many years ago, I had a chance to give a TEDx talk about the economic power of great places. So that theme of great places has always been a part of my work. The other great part of my work are these phenomenal teams that I also teach how to use drills and make things together. But my focus these days in Recast City is along the focus line of how are we creating great downtowns? How are we creating great places by bringing small scale manufacturing businesses into those places? And what does it mean to do that successfully? And what does that mean to do that in a way that is inclusive of the diversity of our community? And what does it mean in all of that to have a downtown or a main street that people love? And why is that important? And that was one of the reasons I wanted to see sort of how some of you answered that last question from the polling, right? Because all of this is important both to smart growth outcomes and to economic resilience, which to me are things that we need to tie closely together. It's not just the built environment, it's about what we put into that built environment and who gets access to that space. All of those things are part of our responsibility. So I want to just take a moment and talk about where we are today and just acknowledging that we're in a pretty tough place, right? And that we need to take a moment also to talk about and to think about how our economic development and planning actions have excluded some people in some places over time. Some actions incredibly purposefully, and some practices are legacy that we don't always understand the impact that we're having right now. But what do we do about it right now? And how do we help more people right now in the work that we're doing through smart growth, through planning, through economic development decisions, particularly around our downtowns and our storefronts? So it's a tough place to start. I mean, there's no way around it. And I think that the place we always have to start our thinking about where we are today is about lives lost, right? And being really clear that this is not, the moment that we're in right now is not just about the closing of businesses, which I'll get to, but that, I've changed this number every 6 days for different talks, right? And when I first pulled this number for a talk on October 1st, it was below 700,000. So the deaths going on in our community, the lives lost in our community are actively still something we are all struggling with. And it's not just something to look back at the last year and a half about, it's about something that we're still suffering from and struggling with today. And that is very much a reality of our communities and of the people who live in our communities. On top of that, We know that the significant number of small businesses have closed. Nearly everybody closed for a number of months last year. It's almost hard to remember it at this point, I think, for many people. And I think in some ways we try to run away from that bad experience that we all had last year of when everything shut down. But the reality is that the impact of the small businesses closing was not even. And so that significantly more Black-owned businesses had to close than white-owned businesses. And as we go through some of these pieces, really recognizing that the impacts are different on different parts of our population. So when we look at the change in employment over time, we see this major loss in low-wage jobs, and a recovery of a lot of middle or higher income jobs. But at the same time, we have news even this morning, news all the time saying how all of these people have left employment. That over 4 million people are not employed where they were before, at the level that we were before the pandemic. And I think it's really, people have been writing about it as this labor shortage. And every time I see the articles, I feel like, wow, words really matter. This is not a labor shortage. This is a payment shortage. This is a wage shortage. And how are we creating more good paying jobs that help people break out of poverty, that help people have middle income jobs, that help people save money and have health insurance and all those good things. So I think it's important to really recognize this change that's going on in our employment. On top of that, we have these huge demographic changes that are going on across the country, right? Even before COVID hit all of us, we had the vast majority of all counties were seeing a decline in working age adult population. Now, some of this is because of the aging of the boomer population, but some of this is also because of brain drain. This is the migration of people who have the option to migrate within the country. And this is really a challenge in a lot of communities that are seeing they've had vacant downtowns not only for a decade, but maybe for 2 or 3 decades at this point. There is a lack of people who remember the place and how it was energized 30, 40 years ago. And there's a lack of belief in those places as well. On top of that, and I know this is the laundry list of bad news at the moment, but I think it's important to sort of center ourselves in reality, is that even before COVID, we as a country had the highest income inequality ever recorded. That means we had the most extreme of have and have nots than we've ever had in our nation's history since we've started recording it. And that really is a sign of not only the lack of opportunity that we're creating for people to break out of low-wage jobs, but also an opportunity for more people to build wealth, to build household wealth, to build family wealth for themselves, right? Because when we look at some of the statistics about across race and ethnicity, we see that the racial wealth gap in our country is just astronomical. And the impacts that we've had on people and their lives is just, I mean, there's not really any words for the different impacts that we've had on different household wealth. The opportunity of a Black household or a Hispanic household to build wealth is 1/10 of a white household on average. And acknowledging that this is not just because of the lack of good paying jobs right now, this is also because of historic inequities, right? We know, especially as planners or people in economic development, that there were very purposeful actions taken by our country, by our federal government, by our states, by our localities, that really excluded people from opportunity. The lack of commercial loans available to Black property owners after the riots in the 60s, redlining, the refusal of FHA loans to Black households, the Fair Labor Act that excluded some of the jobs that are predominantly filled by Black and Latino individuals. All of these things add up to our history, where when a lot of white households were building their wealth in the 50s and 60s, everybody else was excluded. And so I think it's really important to think about not only how we're planning our spaces and how we're thinking about our economic development investments, but the specific actions we are taking today to do better, right? And to look at the impacts of what we're doing today, the vacant properties today and their impacts on our neighborhoods, and say, it's not just about filling the vacant property, it's about doing better and doing more. And the struggles that we need to recognize in different communities about these retail vacancies. Some of them are because of massive changes in the retail footprint need of different businesses, and a lot of the national chain stores really consolidating their footprint to only prime locations, but also that places that do not have strong foot traffic now are struggling to attract and retain any kind of traditional retail because it just doesn't work because they don't have the foot traffic there now. And then going back to this whole job change and job challenge, right? This is even before the pandemic hit. This drop in employment outside of our metro areas after the last recession of 2009. And what that does in all of these different smaller cities and towns across our country, and what we need to do to find ways through where people can have a good paying job and have a business in these non-metro areas as well as these metro areas, and create opportunities for more people. So I know that's a lot of heavy stuff to frame us up with for the day, but I feel like we are not being honest with ourselves, and we're not being honest with the work that we're doing unless we have these conversations of what does all of this mean for our work, for our downtowns, for our economic development and smart growth. Because the upside of it, and I will get optimistic now for you, is that we are at this transformational moment. We are really in this very unique turning point where we can do so much more, but only if we act on it. And this is where small scale manufacturing comes into the story. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about who these businesses are, especially for those of you who have not read the book, Recast Your City, How to Save Your Downtown with Small Scale Manufacturing, or haven't seen me give a talk about this before, but I want to tell you about them through the story of a couple of different businesses and spaces. So this is CO Ceramics. CO Ceramics and is a business that is based here in DC. And they are a really exciting business that does work in ceramics and all different kinds of jewelry. And this business was recently at a local street fair near me, where I, of course, accost them, because that's what I do, is I go find people who make stuff at local fairs and I talk to them about their business in the middle of the fair. And I learned that CO Ceramics was a vendor at this event and has this storefront in DC that's an area with micro retail storefronts where you're, because of the zoning in this area, you're both allowed to sell products as well as do the small scale production of those products in that space. So this is small scale manufacturing, right? She is creating this product, she is selling this product. Small scale manufacturing at the most basic level is any product you can replicate or package. Hot sauce handbags are hardware, artisan to advanced manufacturing. You can pick your phrase that you like the best, but CO Ceramics is a perfect example of this. And one of the reasons that I'm so excited about them is because they're actually doing it at every scale. They are the vendor at the event when they choose to be. They have the micro retail storefront. Most of the storefronts in this area are between 400 and 800 square feet, just to give you a sense of scale. And they're on a pedestrian walkway, not on the prime street frontage. And then her business also sells wholesale. And one of the things that's exciting about a business that sells wholesale out of a small storefront like this is that means that they are capable of bringing in revenues from outside the community. And when we think about what it means to have a business, especially in some of our smaller towns or in neighborhoods that don't have a lot of wealth, being able to bring revenue into the community from online sales is an amazing way to help community members build wealth. Now, this business is going to thrive no matter how many people walk by the storefront, is the truth, because they're selling direct to consumer online and they're selling wholesale. So that means that they have 4 different forms of revenue coming in and are incredibly nimble no matter what is going on in the market, no matter what disaster we're facing. They have all of these different ways to bring in revenue. So that's an example of small scale manufacturing, direct to consumer. Another example is one that's only online. This is Woodhaven Custom Calls. I met them when I did a project with Heflin, Alabama, a small town of 5,000 people. Woodhaven Custom Calls makes turkey calls, I will admit openly that when I first talked about them to the client, I referred to them as turkey whistles, which evidently is not appropriate when you're talking to people who do turkey hunting. So I was laughed at extensively about that. But these are turkey calls, and they make them in a space that is 2 blocks off of Main Street in Heflin, Alabama. They employ a few dozen people, still small scale manufacturing. And one of the exciting things about them is that they do sell their product predominantly online as well as wholesale. But they became so well known during the pandemic because so many people were going out to do outdoor things that they started getting calls from people saying, hey, we're going to be in the area. Can we stop in and see how they're being made? And that draw of seeing how your thing is made is truly an experience. It's an amenity. It's a draw to that place. And so now, the last I spoke to them, they were talking about building a small storefront in the front of their production space so people could come in safely, buy some of their products there, look through a glass window and see the production space and really be a part of that experience, right? Which only strengthens their relationship with the person buying their product because they're seeing it made as well. So this is a business that started online and wholesale, but is also looking at how to be that draw for their own city as well, their own town as well, because they see the benefit of that to the community as well as to the business itself. Then we have different kinds of shared spaces. There's a lot of different examples about this right now. The one you're probably most familiar with is a commercial shared kitchen. They're all different kinds of shared spaces that are, the intention of them are really to help businesses grow at a low barrier to entry. And a commercial kitchen is really exciting because there are not only available to folks who are doing catering and things like that, but a lot of them have set up with bottling stations or different kinds of packaging setups so that people who are doing different kinds of packaged goods can also do production in a commercial shared kitchen. And it means once they're working in a commercial shared kitchen, it means that they can get onto more shelves into more stores and grow their business before they have to make the few $100,000 or a few, even more so, a very expensive investment in their own production kitchen space, which is out of the reach of most businesses until they're scaling pretty extensively. And so commercial shared kitchens are one of the best kinds of shared spaces that we're seeing now pop up all over the country. Some of them are for-profit, some of them are nonprofit. Nonprofit ones are often set with as mission-driven and really look at how they can discount the cost of space so that they can reach their target audience. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. So all of this is small-scale manufacturing, right? These are the people of small-scale manufacturing. These are the businesses of small-scale manufacturing, and are really essential to what we're doing in our communities. Oh, and there's one other one that I can't resist talking about them. They're a new business that actually just launched last year. It's called Saltbox, and they're growing all over the country right now. I just spoke to them a few weeks ago. They are all about e-commerce distribution for small product businesses, and really trying to take away these hurdles. And they are venture backed, and so we are seeing venture backed businesses get into this space of the infrastructure, the ecosystem around small product businesses. There are other businesses like Xometry that has a distributed production model where they actually work with over 500 different partner businesses across the country to do the production that they need of this advanced manufacturing that people hire them to do. So there's so many different places that funding is coming into this for the infrastructure, but it not always directly to the businesses, which is something we can talk about. So all of this comes together to me about building a strong and inclusive economy and having a thriving downtown. And the challenge to me is really about how do we invest in a better way? That we can invest and we can grow, but we need to do it with intention and with purpose, and really think about not only what outcome are we trying to achieve, but who should benefit from that, and being very purposeful about how we address racial inequities and place inequities and create places that people love and that draw other people in. And when I talk about place inequities, you know, we can talk with, there's examples of urban neighborhoods, generally because of racial decisions or racial biases, that have not received the same amount of investment as other parts of the city. We can talk about rural communities that lost major industries over the last 30, 40, 50 years that have not seen the same kind of investment coming in. Not all places have been benefiting the same as others. And so really thinking about this combination of who's been left behind and where has been left behind, so that we can address them, invest in a better way, very purposefully. So the new path forward that I really believe is a part of this transformational moment that we're in, is really about investing in a different way, that we invest in the people who live there now, their businesses, and I promise you, there are small scale manufacturers in every single community. I've done them in really big and really tiny places. There are people who make stuff. We need to invest in the place, and that's going to be generally the downtown or a neighborhood next to downtown, or an older neighborhood Main Street commercial corridor. We need to invest in the place with those people to make sure that those people who are there now benefit from that investment. And we need to create a new structure to support that, to support the place, but also to support the businesses and how they can scale and be resilient, and bring in increasing amounts of revenue if that's what they want to do. And then thinking long-term, but acting now. I'm probably one of the most impatient city planners out there. I never succeeded at doing the 50-year plan so much as doing the 5-month plan. What can we do right now in the next 3 to 9 months that's going to be impactful to people's lives, to people's businesses right now? And that's a lot of what we focus on with Recast City. So the small scale manufacturers in most cases are these hidden gems. They're this missing piece. They're there, they're under the radar. They just sort of have their heads down doing their work. And nobody has ever reached out to them to say, you are important. We want you to be a part of our community and our place and our economic development work. So they provide us with a whole bunch of different benefits to our communities, right? So by investing in these businesses, we help more people build household wealth. There was one statistic I saw recently that said that Black individuals who were business owners had 12 times the household wealth on average than people who did not own, Black individuals who did not own a business, right? So if we're really talking about how are we addressing the racial wealth gap, how are we addressing inequities, historic exclusions within our communities, this becomes a really important way of getting there. These businesses are across every different demographic in our community. We have an amazing heritage and history across our populations of people who make stuff. And so it is an opportunity to build an inclusive table of people, of business owners who produce things, and to help them increase their ability to bring wealth into the community, especially when I talk about selling online and nationally. These businesses also are phenomenal at filling storefronts. And this comes back to that whole vacancy question up front that we're facing right now, right? Because these businesses are both selling in person and online, direct to consumer, and potentially online wholesale, that means that they have different revenue sources coming into that place. And even if they're going into a place with very little foot traffic right now, they can help be that draw. They can help be that experience that brings people to that place to visit them and other folks that come to that area. And they have that resilient business model that lets them fill the storefront, lets people come to the window and see something being made. This one is actually an amazing business in Hawaii that she makes these soaps. And off to the side of the picture was a huge cauldron where when the business or when the shop was quiet, she could mix up her soaps, pour them into the molds, and she could staff her shop and do her production in the same space. Efficient for her cost-wise in terms of having to lease space, but also efficient in terms of staffing and everything that comes with that. And then these businesses filling our vacancies also helps us break out of these cycles of loss and exclusion. It really creates more opportunity within our communities, within our neighborhoods, to grow property values, for more people to open their business in a storefront. A lot of home-based businesses have launched over the last decade. A ton, it seems like, in the last year because of the pandemic or due to the pandemic. But the sector was growing an enormous amount, and people have incredibly successful businesses that are based out of their homes. So the question often is, how do we entice them out of their homes and into storefronts? And how do we do it in a way because we know that it's in fact going to be something that benefits our entire community and our entire downtown? And then lo and behold, when we do take care of our small business owners, when we do invest in them and support them, the word gets out. Word gets out that we are investing in them, that we're providing training, that we're providing space, supporting affordable and space that's in a good state of repair for them, and ideally supporting them with some kind of capital as well. So that it not only attracts entrepreneurs from within the community to take the risk and grow what they're doing, maybe part-time into full-time and have employees, but people from potentially outside of the community over long term might want to be a part of that as well. So all of these are pieces part of the thriving economy. How do we do it? Well, I'd say it's in the book, but I'm going to tell you the 5 steps here and now so that you have something that you can act on. But I will say, I hope you all consider taking a look at Recast Your City. It is truly a labor of love. It is really a compilation of, I feel like, everything I ever learned professionally in my smart growth career and how we do this work. And it's really a DIY kind of book. It's not platitudes. It's really everything from, what questions to ask to worksheets you can download. And you can get the first chapter for free on the book's website, recastyourcity.com. But I'm also going to tell you about a discount code you can get off of use on Island Press to get it at a discount at Island Press, the publisher, as well. So there's 5 steps that we talk about in the book, or that I talk about in the book. I have a tendency to generalize that statement. So there's 5 steps, and they're going to probably sound really familiar to a lot of you. And to me, the interesting or the exciting part of it always is about how we do it, how we go about doing some of these things. So the first step is always, what outcome are we working to achieve and who should benefit from these investments? Right, I talked about that a little bit at the beginning, but I think it is really important for us to be very specific about both of these. Is this about filling 3 of 10 storefronts so we can show people? Is this about creating programming for vendors downtown because we know that can be a pipeline to getting people into storefronts? Is this about benefiting Black women food product businesses in our community because we see that there's a need for food production space? Being as specific as we can. And one of the things that's important about that is because we want to know it when we succeed. We want to know what success looks like from the beginning so that we can really, with an incredible amount of focus, make sure that the investments and the decisions and the actions that we take at the end are laser focused on achieving those outcomes. And I know politically that is really hard to do sometimes, but I have to say that when we just say the public or small business owners, there is no way to know what kind of benefit we're really creating. And the vast majority of the time, when we don't say that we want to benefit a specific population, it's still going to mean white business owners in our community. And so if we want to address these racial inequities, we want to address these histories of exclusion within our community, we want to address folks that are underserved today in what's going on, then we have to be specific about it. The second step is about finding new people and connecting with them. There is nothing rocket science about this. This is, in fact, about finding new people, particularly small-scale manufacturing business owners within the community. And we have a whole system to help you find small-scale manufacturing business owners in your community because, as you probably know, there's no ready-made database of these business owners in your community. Some of them might be under a business licensing that has to do with manufacturing or fabrication, but a lot of them don't. They might be listed under retail or deli if they have some kind of food that they produce and sell to consume on site. The whole way we have business categorizations is just a mess, in my opinion. So we have a whole way for you to find small scale manufacturers. We also have a whole system to find people I call connectors. Connectors with a capital C, that's on purpose. Connectors are the people who are known and trusted in a specific population in a specific part of your community, and believe in the future of your place, believe in the future of your downtown. And you can work with the connectors to do outreach into different parts of your population. The reality is that nobody knows everybody unless you're in a really small town. Nobody knows everybody, and nobody has relationships with everybody in the community. And the other reality is we have a history that's created a lot of lack of trust. We've broken a lot of trust, especially in the planning community historically, as well as with economic development. We've broken a lot of trust. And so I believe we have to take steps, clear, concrete steps to not only start rebuilding trust, but build new relationships. And that's what these connectors and the organizations that maybe they represent, that can help us build back these relationships, and not only help us find small scale manufacturing business owners who might be home-based businesses right now, but who help us understand and help us convene some of these people who may not be comfortable coming to us from the position that we have. And additionally, we have to find other people who need to be at the table to have buy-in for implementation at the end. So that might be the people who are providing support in the small business ecosystem. That might be local economic development authority leadership. There's a lot of other categories. And finding these people is not just about a big public meeting, even though I know that's what I'm showing here from Columbia, Missouri. It's really about making sure that we're reaching out to the individuals, asking the individual business owners to come, and also going to them. So step 3 is really about all going to them, which is about the conversations we need to have. And we, in Recast City, I talk a lot about one-on-one conversations with both business owners and property owners, and then a series of small group discussions with some of those folks in the ecosystem or that need to be part of the implementation at the end. And it's important to talk about the conversations that we need to have with people who may not have a storefront in the community. Asking them to come to you might be okay, but in most cases, we actually recommend going to the small scale manufacturer's place of business. And this is not, part of this is to see how their production is made, but also part of this is about honoring what they do and saying, I understand you are a business owner without any free time in your day, and I will come to you to make this as easy as possible for you to really help us understand what works and what doesn't work for you. And in the book, we provide a set of template questions that you can use for these interviews that really help you understand both quantitatively as well as qualitatively what works and what doesn't work for these small scale manufacturing businesses. We do it in person interviews outside because of COVID if you want. In person, this picture was definitely before the pandemic. But really thinking about how are we making people at ease, building personal relationships and trust, because these are the people that we'll ultimately want in our storefronts. We want them to be part of our programs. And so this is a first step in being able to build relationships with them. The next step is understanding what we learned from those conversations. So we host a series of one-on-one interviews in person, host a series of small group discussions, but ultimately we need to understand what assets support the businesses and the target outcome the best. We go back to that outcome from the very beginning and who should benefit from it, and really pull out from the conversations what already is happening that makes the biggest difference that we can build on. And then, are there different needs across our demographic diversity? Did we hear different things from different business owners? We need to tease out those differences because we want to make sure that we're reducing barriers, especially for our target population, but also across the board. And then what gaps are most critical to help us achieve our outcome and benefit our target audience? There might be programs that aren't there. There might be affordability or space issues. There might be capital challenges. But we need to make sure that we're really understanding what those gaps are, what assets are there we can build on, and how we can get there as fast as possible. And then the last, yes, is about being impatient, but it's really about action. We always talk about what actions can you take in the near term, the next 3 to 9 months, not the next 5 to 15 years. What can we do right now? There's a ton of things I will tell you any community can do. And I will say that right now, especially because of the funding flowing from the federal government to local government, is even more of an opportunity. And how do we have small wins that can help build support for those bigger, harder investments down the road? We want to show those near-term actions and them as wins very publicly so that we can do bigger, harder things down the road and make it visible and make it celebrated. So we did a project now a couple of years ago with Columbia, Missouri, the Business Loop Community Improvement District. And one of the things that I found really striking about Carrie, working with Carrie on this, which was fantastic, but was Carrie sort of recognizing that these businesses were just this hidden economic engine that were churning out, that were just making things happen, working really hard in their community. And mostly it was about giving them the exposure, highlighting them, creating space for them, celebrating them in the work that they were doing in the improvement district. One of the other things we found was that there was a huge need for a commercial shared kitchen, particularly from Black and brown women in the community, who had food product businesses at home and were bursting at the seams, and really would also benefit not only from space to expand, but also training on how to be in a commercial kitchen. There's a lot of health rules, not only to use the space, but also to scale a business like that. So how do we continue to scale that? And then as well as changing some of the zoning in the corridor to be able to ensure that artisan industry, artisan manufacturing businesses would be allowed on that corridor, even though the zoning had been recently changed before that. So what do you do with all of this? What can you do with all of this? To me, it is all about taking action and creating these great places, but creating these great places by saving our small businesses and really investing in them. And there's a couple of things that you can think about even now. How do you create affordable space for a diversity of small businesses in downtown? Do you need micro retail spaces? Do you need to help property owners subdivide space? Is there a role for the city in really creating a proof of concept around that? The second thing to look at is filling in the gap in business assistance with local initiatives. Not only offering small business assistance in multiple languages, if you have people who speak multiple languages in your community, but working with connectors, faith organizations, neighborhood leaders, cultural groups to share that information and reach deeply into networks where you may not have a direct access point, where if you put it on Facebook, or Twitter or LinkedIn, the people that you wanted to reach may not see it, but if it goes out in an email from the neighborhood leader or the faith organization, people will be aware of it. And then thinking about how to support existing and scaling businesses before we're looking at startups. I think startups are really exciting. They're really high risk. Somebody who has an idea for a business is a much higher risk than somebody who already is producing something, has figured out some amount of product market fit, has figured out some amount of marketing and process of their business, and is already making it happen. And so I always talk about how do we find the existing product businesses in our community first and help them be stronger, grow their revenue, scale if that's what they want to do, and get that part solid before we start investing in the startup culture that is all over the country. Third is looking at growing a targeted investment model and really thinking about what is the capital that folks need. We have revolving loan fund programs all over the country. I'm working on that separately from this. We have CDFIs. We have huge gaps in our investment models, and understanding what is the gap in your community. Do you need a micro loan program? Do you need a micro grant program? And who's the best to lead things like that is going to be an important part of this. And then yes, looking at your policies, looking at your zoning, we want to make sure there aren't barriers to having these businesses in our storefronts, in our downtowns, on our main streets. And that's not just zoning, that's permitting. How hard is it to get an occupancy permit if you're any kind of small business in your community? I cannot tell you how many small businesses I have told you where they said that the occupancy permit process was the craziest, longest black hole process they had ever heard of. So I highly recommend you look at your internal policies, and then really looking at how do you do all of this and build community pride. A lot of places are having their holiday markets again this year. How are you using that as not only a way to build community pride, build community ownership of the space and of these local businesses, but honestly using these events as an opportunity to incubate more and diverse product business owners within your community. These events, where you have vendors, are, to me, an incubator. They're a first step for startups and for micro businesses to sell products. And those businesses might be phenomenal storefront users in the future. And so really thinking about how do you engage them and cultivate them, provide them with training or capital or space as they continue to grow. These settings are phenomenal to build all those opportunities. So hope you're ready to act after all of this. Two things that you can take away from this. One, as I said, recastyourcity.com. You can get the first chapter for free. If you would like to join me on LinkedIn, LinkedIn is where I am always looking for great ideas that are happening in different parts of the country. And any community that does something cool on this that I see, I share it on LinkedIn. It's been amazing to see how much of this is across the country at this point and how many good things are happening in different parts of the country. The other thing that I will tell you is that you can get your copy of Recast Your City, How to Save Your Downtown with Small Scale Manufacturing, directly from Ilana Preuss. If you use promo code SMART, you can get 30% off the list price. or you can always get it at full price from bookshop.org or on Kindle from amazon.com. But I will tell you that the cover is in fact this bright yellow, and it'll look great on your background on Zoom, on whatever platform you use for your videos. So it's a great, bright book. And I hope you will consider getting a copy of it for yourself. So out of all this, the one takeaway I hope for you is to really think about how you take action and why you're taking action. What does it mean to you? What does it mean to help bring people together? What does it mean to help build pride in your community? What does it mean to help business owners really be able to showcase the amazing things that they are creating and the good paying jobs that they're creating as well in the community, and the leadership that it takes to create this kind of opportunity within your community? The small business training for product businesses, the spaces, the real estate spaces that different product businesses need when they're micro retail space or when they're scaling and want a bigger storefront. And then the capital that's needed to help buildings and business owners really be able to occupy these spaces. So to me, this is really about saving our downtowns and our small businesses, and it is definitely worth it. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. If anybody wants to check out the Recast City website also, you can sign up for our newsletter and get on our list for all sorts of stuff. You're always welcome to contact me directly. And these are all the various ways you can find me as well. And with that, I believe I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to go to Q&A.
Great, thanks, Ilana. And we'll have you turn on your camera now so people can see you while we're doing the Q&A. And thanks to everybody who's submitted questions. We've got many for you for the next 40 minutes or so. So if you want to continue to ask questions, we'll accept them in the queue there on the questions tab. Okay, so to get started here, first question is from Elaine McGregor, who says, many of the spaces that might be used for small businesses in our city are being grabbed by developers for high-rise condominiums. How do we create a great and inclusive downtown with this constant pressure?
Yeah, it's a great question, especially in a hot market. I think there's a really key factor, and sorry about the sun coming through, it all shifted while I was talking. I think we as a community, we have to decide if affordable space for locally owned businesses is a public good. Needless to say, I believe that it is a public good, like affordable housing. We want to keep locally owned businesses. We want to keep businesses that have middle income jobs, not just low wage jobs like retail or service jobs. We want to keep businesses that have middle income jobs in our community. And so I believe that there is in fact a public role in creating policies that require property owners to set aside some ground floor space for locally owned businesses, and that we can also do it through the negotiation or proffer process with some property owners as well. The micro retail space that I showed you that CO Ceramics is in a new, what was a new apartment building at the time when it was built, and it was part of an art district, and those spaces were negotiated as part of the public good, as part of a public benefit when the buildings were constructed. And so there is a space for it. There is an opportunity in it with private development, but it takes political leadership, it takes political will. The other way we can engage around it is through community development corporations or land trusts, where we can purchase some of the properties and make sure that we're retaining some spaces affordable in perpetuity. There's a phenomenal research study that just came out, having nothing to do with the Recast City, but that I've been looking at, called anti-displacement. It's about anti-displacement in commercial space, and it is a really great set of policies and ideas that really help with that.
Okay, thank you. Next question here is from Jenna Ellswick, who's saying, leases in downtown are often more expensive than in other places, and municipalities don't have any control over that. How can we address this issue?
Yeah, so higher cost spaces are definitely a challenge. There's a couple of different possibilities. One is the municipality can create a retail incubator program. So a lot of different municipalities have done this. Nearly every one of you is getting ARPA money, American Rescue Plan Act money. A big portion of that is about economic resilience. And so you can use your funding to help lease a space and help businesses incubate. It's also about the size of spaces that are in downtown. Sometimes downtown is so expensive because the only space you can get is 5,000 square feet or bigger, or even 2,000 square feet or bigger. If we can create an intermediary that can master lease a space and help 5 micro businesses go into the same space, it becomes much more affordable for those businesses. That being said, sometimes downtown is just really expensive. And so then we look at the non-prime retail spaces in downtown. What's on the non-prime street face? Is there an opportunity to create this funky alleyway facing set of micro retail shops? I was just talking to somebody yesterday about an area that's looking at doing that, where there's an alleyway that, you know, isn't very much, but you could renovate the back of these buildings to have small windows and storefronts and make it a pedestrian way and create something very funky. So there's a lot of really creative ways to access space. And because retail is shrinking in a lot of places, dividing up these spaces front and back is sometimes a really good solution to make the spaces more accessible to folks. That being said, if you're in a big city, the middle of downtown may not be the right place. It might be a neighborhood that's adjacent to downtown. It might be a historic industrial area that's in the middle of the city. There might be a neighborhood retail corridor that might be the right kind of place. So there's a lot of different ways of looking at spaces, but I wouldn't give up on a place just because it's expensive. I go back to that original point of affordable space for local business is a public good. We don't leave affordable housing just up to the private sector. We actually have an intervention because we know this is important. And the reality is that, and this was said to me by a housing director of a jurisdiction, we are unlikely to ever have enough funding to build all of the affordable housing that we need. So the other way to do it is to help more people build their household wealth so that they can afford where to live. And so part of that is about creating and preserving space for good paying jobs in our community, middle income jobs, business ownership spaces that are locally owned so that more people can access that opportunity.
Okay, thanks, Ilana. Next question here is from Beth Harbour, who's asking, what is the source of the calculation that Black business owners have 12 times the household wealth of non-business owners?
I have to find the citation. I actually don't have it right in front of me. I was doing research for another talk last week in economic development, and I will pull that. And Michael, if you guys want to post it afterwards, I can share it with you.
Surely, yeah. We'll whatever information. Go ahead.
I think it was a study that Brookings did, but I have to find the link.
Okay. Yeah, anything that Ilana shares with us, we'll post on our webinar archive page with the recording and the handouts. Okay. Next question here is from Brian Jackson, who said, have you noticed any cities or places using this approach to mitigate the supply chain breakdowns that occurred during the pandemic and is ongoing now? And is this a possible opportunity to build wealth and create investment in historically marginalized areas?
Yes, and maybe. So, I mean, we have a supply chain breakdown that happened last year, and that, if anybody was watching the news this week, is very much ongoing. I saw a clip of the news out of the port of LA with all of these huge tankers with shipping piled on with shipping containers just parked out at sea because they can't get through the port fast enough. Something like 50 or 60 of them were just parked out at sea, which is crazy. And people are already saying, if you don't have the product in the country for this winter's holiday season, you're not going to get it here by then. So I do think that there is, unfortunately, in that way, an opportunity to really turn towards local producers. The challenge is that there's a missing connector piece. There's no matchmaking that happens in a lot of cases, and it's really something that's missing in most every cases. So being able to go to either a large purchaser in the community or a local store that does sell consumer products, or to major anchor institutions, and be able to say, what are you buying? Let me help you find somebody, ideally within the region or even within the state, who might be making that product, so that we can help you not be dependent on these breakdowns in the supply chain. Because you almost need like a reverse pitch moment where you can collect information from a couple of different stores and then go out to your small scale manufacturing businesses and say, hey, is anybody making this stuff? Or can you very quickly pivot to make some of this stuff? And it's not an overnight process if they don't make it already, right? People started making masks and gowns pretty much overnight because we had the need, but that comes at a cost. And so really needing to prep folks and talk about that is an important piece. The other part is that most communities do not have a standing list of small scale manufacturing business owners. So you can go to the anchor, but then you don't know where to turn around. So that's why the process in the book is really about finding these businesses, building the relationships with them, and then also being able to make these kinds of connections.
Okay. Next question here is from David Keene, who's asking, can you talk about the zoning and building codes that allow a combination of light manufacturing or food preparation and retail, particularly in light of moving into older buildings?
Yeah, so the zoning is really not a challenge. Nashville's done it, Indianapolis has done it, Montgomery County, Fairfax County. I mean, like, there's a lot of places that have changed their zoning to allow artisan manufacturing. And one second, I'm going to turn off my video for just a second. And the thing that we're seeing in a lot of these places is that it's just a question of making sure that these uses are not creating any more kind of external negative impact than anything else might be happening. So if you have a restaurant in a community, then you're going to have potentially smells from the cooking coming out of that place. That's going to be no different than what's going on in any of these spaces. There are some areas that allow something like dog kennels or dog grooming places, which are very noisy, but may have questions about small scale manufacturing, when in reality, small scale manufacturing is modern manufacturing. It's clean, it's quiet. It's a great neighborhood because it attracts people there. So there are a lot of examples out there of, you can just do a Google search for artisan manufacturing zoning, and a bunch of different folks will come up. But I often point people to the Nashville example because it's short and sweet and simple. Columbia, Missouri, as I said, just adopted it for this one part of town. So they're also a great example. From a building reuse perspective, there's not really any barriers. The vast majority of these businesses are not having any major impact in terms of sound or fumes. And so it's no different than having a restaurant or bar or, I don't know if you know what other example might be coming through. I think from a building code perspective, often the biggest challenge is whether or not a community has a different code for rehab versus new construction. And that, from my smart growth days, I remember is being really important difference because it helps lower the cost of renovations, of bringing it up to safe code without bringing it up to the same as a new construction.
Okay. Next question here is from Roy Guthrie, who asks, how are you thinking about trails, outdoor recreation, and economic growth? Investments in these drive customers to small local businesses such as bike shops.
Yeah, I mean, my focus predominantly is on the producers. So it's going to be less on the tourism side. Yes, if you have a whole bunch of very cool, unique businesses, you might end up drawing tourists to that place, because when you have a great downtown, people find out and then they want to come visit it. That's going to be true of communities that have bike trails coming through or have a riverfront nearby. There are different ways that you can attract people off of those trails into downtown. We're working with Windsor Locks, Connecticut, and they have exactly that question. They have a trail that goes along the waterfront, and as they redevelop their downtown, they're really working on how do you draw people in. And that some of that is things like signage, some of that is like things like marketing and social media and using the same hashtags as that destination, that outdoor recreation that people might be coming from. But a lot of it is just about really investing in the place and really investing in having unique opportunities for people to see and experience and be in places that are unlike other places, because that's part of what the draw is.
Okay. Next question here is from Lynn Farrow, who says, hi, Ilana. Do you have any advice on how to recruit shared kitchen or makerspace organizations to a tourist town? Do they usually want to be located in industrial areas?
Oh, that's a great question. To a tourist town, I'm not sure what a difference that makes. I mean, I think the biggest question is, do you have demand? And this, again, is why we start with outcome and interviews with small scale manufacturing business owners. We want to find the demand before we invest. We want to de-risk the investment that may be made. And so we want to make sure that there is demand for it. There are some private sector companies that are creating commercial kitchens in different places at different price points and in different kinds of communities. There's a lot that's been done in the nonprofit commercial kitchen space that you can talk to different people who have created them and really replicate it yourself, and then really hire a kitchen manager more than hiring somebody to sort of take over the whole thing. There's the scheduling software, there's a lot of different pieces involved in it. So all of those things are opportunities, but I think it's important to think about why you're doing it, what's the mission of your commercial kitchen, and really who should benefit from it as you're developing it. Really make sure that that vision and that mission are very clear, so that you know what success looks like as you're creating that space. I have seen commercial kitchens that are on main streets. It really is a question of scale and impact. Can your commercial kitchen have a little cafe or a commissary at the front so that it has some engagement with the public if it is in downtown, if it is on the main street? So it is helping attract the foot traffic, and that the commercial kitchen is, back through the door. So there's a lot of different ways to do that in all of these different places.
Okay, thanks, Ilana. Next question here is from Chris Sevi, who's asking, how do I identify the people who are underserved in my community?
That's a great question. I think you've got to look at who's benefited from some of your work in the past. So what is the demographics of your community now? Who has the storefronts in your community now? Who's gotten the loans in the past? Who's benefited from training programs in the past? And looking at the different demographics. I'm working separately on the US EDA revolving loan fund programs. And one of the things that we've learned very quickly is that people have amazing intentions, but measuring your success is where we know whether or not we're going to follow through on from intention to implementation. And so we might have a whole amazing diversity of people who applied for a loan or a different kind of program, but the people who actually get into the program or get the loan at the end of the day may not represent the demographic diversity of our community. And so if that is that demographic diversity a part of our measure of success? Is that something we report on month to month to know if we're hitting our target? And underserved might be across race and ethnicity or immigrant status or income or gender. There's a lot of different ways we in fact slice and dice our communities. And so it's important to look at all of those different elements of what is our demographic diversity today in this community now, in this region, and what do we want to do about making sure that we are benefiting that diversity.
Okay, thank you. Next question here is, what kind of strategic investments have you seen communities reach for when funding for improvements is very limited?
So I think there's a lot that you can do with very limited funding. And I work with a whole bunch of really small towns in Indiana that do have very limited funding. And it's important to acknowledge that up front, because the limits might be a resource of staff time, which it almost always is, and it might be a limit of investment funding. There is, again, I always go back to, what do you want your downtown to be? Who should benefit from that? And then talking to the small scale manufacturers, because the best way to know how to spend our money is to know as specifically as possible, what do these businesses need to succeed? It might be that having 20 vendors that join our farmers market every week could make an enormous difference in the wealth building opportunity for a bunch of people in our community. It might be helping provide matching funding to 3 storefronts to renovate and build out their storefront space, could make a huge change in how people perceive downtown. There's really incremental investments that we can make that make an enormous difference in how people perceive a place and how people experience a place. One of the things I think that's really interesting is when we look at big developers in different parts of the country, one of the things that they do when they get, especially more urban projects, they sort of get control over a big piece of land. And the first thing that they do is they do a little bit of development, and then they do a ton of programming. And what that programming does is it changes the way we perceive a place. And so and the other thing is we're socializing our existence to small businesses and people who we are going to want in our space in the future. And so I think it's really important to think about how we're using programming, not just for the sake of programming and having people there, but programming as a way to incubate how people perceive the place, small businesses that might be able to be at downtown, change the perception of the property owners in downtown too, and the marketing around that. And a lot of times that's not a high cost thing to start changing the programming. And one of the things that we see with the benefit of programming, there's a great community development corporation that did this very purposefully, is they actually, because they were the CDC, they could provide small retail spaces on a percent revenue basis. It wasn't a regular lease. It was a very low base rate, and then a percent of the revenue, so that if the business did really well, the property owner did really well. And so they had an incentive to drive people into these storefronts. And what they did is they programmed like crazy the public spaces so that people were constantly going by those storefronts to help drive up the revenue in these spaces. And so I think it's really important to think about this feedback loop and which parts of it do we control outright, which parts of it can we fund, which parts do we need partners for. I was just talking to a community earlier this week, and I was asking them about, sort of who has the energy in the community, because they obviously didn't have energy in their downtown. And they said, everybody is all about the high school sports teams. And I said, well, what about getting the high school sports teams to do festivals or dinners or award ceremonies in the downtown and building up activity around them? So really figuring out who already is doing things that we can really bring together in these places. And the same thing with product businesses. Who has home-based product businesses that we can bring out and showcase and have them be a part of these spaces, even at small increments of funding.
Okay, thank you. Next question here is from Roger Eastman, who says, great presentation, Ilana. Do you have any thoughts on how to deal with a hypersensitive West Coast community who wants to promote their downtown, but who are reluctant to allow the kinds of businesses that you're describing, because they are very fearful of the impacts to adjoining businesses, both perceived mostly and possible, such as dust and noise, etc.?
Yeah, people are really sensitive. So I worked in a community like that this past year. I wrapped up a project in downtown Santa Monica a couple of months ago. I think the best way is show and tell. I have to tell you, I think by showing people exactly what these businesses are. I showed you CO Ceramics, or Woodhaven is not the example I would use, but other direct-to-consumer products and businesses. It's the chocolate manufacturer, it's the candle maker, it is, it's the jewelry maker, it's also the textile producer. These aren't things that are any noisier or dirtier than anything else that's going into those spaces. The other thing that I think is important to point out to people is that there are tons of vacancies and there's no users on the horizon. We're in a really different time than we were 5 years ago. And actually creating space for businesses that operate in person and online is a much lower risk investment on space than somebody who's completely dependent on foot traffic. And really educating people about how the markets have changed in this way, and that people still want experiential retail. When they come out, they want an experience, they want to see things, and the opportunity to see things made is great, and this is modern manufacturing. So I think that a lot of it is about socializing the concepts, socializing the businesses. That's one of the reasons that I talk about having vendor events, especially near where we want people to be filling spaces, because not only does the business owner get to know that area, but the property owner ultimately can get to know those businesses as future users. But there are challenges. I don't gloss over that at all. There are some property owners that are just not interested in anything unless it's a national credit kind of business, and that's who they're going to be. But I always talk about finding the property owners who are the believers, who are willing to try something new because they're out there, or crowdfunding the proof of concept. There's a lot of different ways to get there. So I understand that people are sensitive about it, but I think it's really much more about showing people and having them experience what we're talking about very in person.
Okay, thank you. Next question here is from Margaret Rifkin, who says, can you address market issues? It seems like many of these wonderful small-scale manufacturing businesses sell luxury or niche items, lots and lots of beauty and skincare products, soap and candles and jewelry. Do you have any good examples of small-scale manufacturing of affordable necessities, like recycled hotel soap. Someone is doing that, but I think on a bigger scale.
Yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of small scale manufacturing. I talk about the consumer goods a lot because they make cool storefronts. Needless to say, small scale manufacturing is not just about your storefronts. It's also your older industrial areas. They want generally under 2,000 square feet, definitely under 5,000 square feet. So our older industrial areas that are close in or in the city are often great bets for that. The business I was referring to earlier, it's called Xometry. They do advanced manufacturing, additive and subtractive manufacturing, which it's fascinating. But what they've done is they've created actually an online algorithm so that any entity like NASA or the auto industry or the aeronautical industry that has a thing that they need made, the 3D thing that they need made, they can upload the specs of that thing. And Xometry immediately quotes them a price, where historically before Xometry, you would get it and they would go and look for bids, and then they would come back like 3 weeks later with an estimate. Xometry's algorithm is constantly, I think, consuming what's out there on the market to right fit their pricing. But not only do they have the algorithm, they built this off of a distributed production model. And so they have continued they have hundreds and hundreds of businesses all over the country that have more or less gone through their level of spec of exactitude, for lack of a real world word that's coming to my head right now, to do these NASA products exactly as needed. And so they take that product that's come in that they've already priced, and they distribute that production to all of these different businesses around the country. Some of it's super high end, like NASA advanced manufacturing. Some of it's a prototype in 3D printed plastic that somebody needs. Another thing might be detailed and technical screen printing or laser cutting. But they have relationships all over the country to do this. What it means is that we have the ability to also bring advanced manufacturing and high tech knowledge to any city and have them access this broader marketplace that is going on across the country. So I think it's important to remember that it isn't just about consumer. It isn't just about something that a lot of people perceive as a fad, which it's not. It is only seems to keep growing. And I think that I think increasingly we're seeing people make the decision for buying one locally made, slightly higher cost item instead of fast fashion or something like that. There are a lot of businesses that are looking at the environment. They're looking at reuse. They're looking at recycling products, and they're all over the place. There's a whole life cycle arm in Austin. The Austin city government has a whole small business support arm having to do with the life cycle businesses. So there's all different kinds of product businesses out there. I also wouldn't discount the folks that are making the lotions and potions. There's huge market demand for a lot of different things, a lot of untapped potential in a lot of those markets. A lot of it is often about how you market it and how you're getting it out there. And they can provide people with good incomes for themselves and their family. And so it's another way through.
Okay, thank you. Next comment and question here is from Will Kratt, who's saying, these are all great and inspiring stories. Do you know of any businesses that, in addition to providing all of these benefits, also have seen success in implementing an open hiring policy? For example, providing opportunities to those experiencing homelessness or have been incarcerated in the past or have other traditional barriers to employment?
No, absolutely. There's phenomenal examples in this field of teaching people a skill and also teaching people entrepreneurship. I will give you my rant on entrepreneurship versus workforce development for just a second. At some point in our world, and I do still think this is based historically in racism, but I can't prove that yet. It's just a sneaking suspicion I have, is that we divided up teaching people workforce development, trade skills, and teaching people entrepreneurship. When in reality, a lot of times people who are gone through a workforce development program are in fact perfectly positioned to become their own business owners, and we need to teach both these things. But the question that you asked was about incarcerated individuals, formerly unhoused individuals. Yes, there are wonderful examples all over the country. There's one that I love in New York City called Refoundry. that works with formerly incarcerated individuals and teaches them how to work in wood and metal to make furniture, and then brings those products to Brooklyn Flea, a very well-known and a market that is attended to by people with a fair amount of money in New York City. And they sell those products, and the people who have learned the skill to make those pieces of furniture or cutting boards or whatever it is get the revenue from that. But they're also teaching those same individuals to be entrepreneurs and to be their own business owners, because we know that a lot of time people who were formerly incarcerated or have been unhoused for a long time have a really hard time getting a job. And so becoming your own business owners is often the only way out. And so that's a big part of what they do. So Refoundry is in New York. Before the pandemic, they were expanding to LA, but I don't know where that is anymore. But there are other businesses like that all over the country that are phenomenal at really connecting these dots too.
Okay, thanks, Ilana. Next question here is from our colleague in Maryland, Wendy Erminger, who asks, how large are issues of tax avoidance and immigration status in trying to get home-based manufacturers to participate in community or local government economic development initiatives?
I don't know. I mean, it's an important question, and I don't really know what the scale is like. I think there is some of that in any community, but I think a lot of times if people see the opportunity to really get the support to scale and really grow their revenues, people want to become official businesses. They want to really get the benefits, but we do have to make sure it's clear that people are safe. We have to build trust with individuals to make sure that they do understand that they are safe, no matter who they are or where they're from. And work with connectors and trusted individuals within their community as part of that. And then make it really clear what the benefits are. It's not just about getting into the formal business system, but how are we going to help them grow their revenue so it's worth their while? How are we going to give them better space to work in? Are they going to get access to different markets, a bigger audience to sell to, whatever it is? There's a great organization in Nashville that I worked with a couple of years ago called oh, come on, what's the name of the organization? Conexión America. They work predominantly with the Hispanic population in Nashville, and they face this challenge a lot. And their organization has been working with the Hispanic population in Nashville for a long time, but it's all about building the trust with those individuals and then helping people make this kind of transition.
Okay, thank you. Questions are still coming in hot and heavy here, so if you can go over an extra 5 minutes or so, we'll ask as many as we can get through. I appreciate all the questions coming in, and I know Ilana gets a lot of questions, and you can also contact her directly. So
this is the fun part.
It is, no, definitely, and those who are online can go to our webinar archives and see a couple other times Ilana's been with us and answering questions. Timothy Richards asks, generally speaking, what are the top few zoning changes that you think are really needed to make this happen?
So definitely adding an artisan manufacturing land use definition and then adding it to as many existing zones as you can. That's what Nashville did. I thought that they set a great precedent of add the artisan manufacturing land use definition through amendment, and then adding it to as many different commercial districts as you can, just to remove that as a barrier. Fairfax County, Nashville did it before I ever worked with anybody on the zoning. And Fairfax County, Virginia, I helped them work on it. They needed a lot more detail in theirs because they were, like in California, one of these more sensitive places with more questions about how it was going to play out. But they wanted to also allow it in all of their office buildings because they have a huge, even before the pandemic, they had a huge vacant office building challenge. And so we really looked at how we do that. So those are two models. The other, in Fairfax County, we addressed the parking requirement side of it as well. You know, these are businesses that are, on average, to me, in my experience, they're about 1 employee per 500 square feet. The parking is not the issue. People aren't coming and staying for a long time like in a restaurant. And so we want to make the parking requirements as lenient or as low as possible, or even getting rid of parking requirements for these kinds of businesses if it's in a place that, if there's any chance that somebody can walk to them. Same thing with the micro retail. The project that I showed you with CO Ceramics is a project in DC called the Art Walk at Monroe Street. Those micro retail spaces have shared bathrooms and shared cleaning sinks so they can reduce the cost of each of the spaces because of it. And they made through the community benefit agreement with the neighborhood, they committed to 30 years below market rate space for those micro retail spaces as part of their negotiation with the city. So there's some really, really great ways to look at it. I do think that there is a need to look at incentives, just like we have density bonuses for affordable housing. I think we need to have density bonuses for commercial, where they commit a specific amount of ground floor space to either micro retail or to locally owned businesses. San Francisco has a really cool, I think it's an overlay district for small enterprise businesses that requires some or all of the ground floor space to be spaces that are, I can't remember exactly what the number is. I think it's under 2,500 square feet, where most places, at least before the pandemic, when we were building retail, people were still building really big footprint spaces. The need for retail has really changed. And so a lot of folks that have buildings that have 5,000, 10,000 square foot ground floor spaces are really struggling to fill it. And so I do think we also need to look at, outside of the zoning or permitting question, are there financial incentives we can provide to help people convert some of these larger spaces into a number of smaller ones too.
Okay, thank you. Next question here is from Gladys Hurwitz, another one of our colleagues, who's asking, what is your advice to young entrepreneurs who want to get started on a small business concept or project? My child is under 10 and is already thinking of business ideas, and we were thinking about resources to help us get started to develop her ideas further.
Oh, I love that. I tried to get my team to do that a number of times, but I didn't win that conversation. So I do have to say, for all the ups and downs that Etsy has gone through, Etsy is a phenomenal place. There's a younger site now also owned by Etsy now called Depop. A lot of them have a lot of how-to information on their websites. But even just learning how to make a product, take pictures, get it online. One of the things that I love also about Etsy is that for years they've had a craft entrepreneurship curriculum. They created the curriculum 5, 6, 7 years ago, I can't remember now, because they wanted to help provide this curriculum to organizations that work particularly with low-income households to help people who made things learn how to launch a business. And so I do think that it's important to think about, as much as I say we start with the existing businesses first, because there are plenty of them there to start with, I think it is really important to think about how are we helping people build opportunity for themselves and their households through something like an online product business. And so for kids or for adults, those are the places I would start.
Okay, thank you. Next one here is from Joshua Sloan, who says, can you please talk about the potential to build this in concert with the arts? It seems like a lot of these spaces and business owners are turning their craft or their art into marketable products. This could build with storefront studios, art spaces, and so on.
Absolutely, there's a huge overlap. There's a lot of people in this space that call themselves artists, and I call them small scale manufacturing. My definition of small scale manufacturing is anytime you're replicating something. So as long as you're making 5 or 10 of that same thing, you might be an artist or an artisan, and I'm going to call you small scale manufacturing. So there is this space that, and every community that I work with is, can define it themselves. So for my work, I say you have to replicate it. If it's one off on something, you're to me an artist. You're making one of a thing. So there is a lot of overlap, and that's why when we look at arts districts, or arts and culture districts, these businesses can really be a core part of how we're helping people not only tap into their artistic abilities, but also tap into being business owners. One of the things that I really love seeing is that there's an art school, a famous art school in Maryland called MICA, for anybody who might be familiar with it, based in Baltimore. And a new president came in a couple of years ago, and one of the things that I kept hearing about him as soon as he came in was that he realized that he needed to teach the artists how to be business owners, right? It's not about being a starving artist. It's about having a business where you can actually have a livelihood and create the thing that you love to create. So I've always thought about that as part of this. So yes, there's a huge amount of overlap. And I think that the thing to think about with an arts district still is who gets access to the storefronts, who gets access to the galleries, how is that representing the demographic diversity of your community? How are you making sure that people who've been underrepresented in your arts community in the past are getting access to trainings, to financing, to real estate space, and being really purposeful about it?
Okay, next one here from Brett Garman, who says, can you talk a bit more about the parameters around small scale manufacturing? How much machinery, chemicals, noise, et cetera, is involved before it doesn't fit in a small storefront setting?
That's going to be up to you and your community. I generally say as long as nothing toxic is leaving that space, and nothing in terms of noise is an external, a negative externality, as we say in the environmental world, then it's going to be great. I mean, there's a lot of things that have to have different ventilations depending on what you're using. The reality is when you're in a storefront, the cost of that ventilation might be so high that it's going to preclude somebody from doing something that has any kind of toxic fumes. But anytime you're painting something, there's some kind of fumes involved. So it's really looking at how do we do this in a way that is not impacting folks negatively. If you were allowed to have an artist working in the studio space and painting has fumes, so that's a part of it. So I think it's important to just think about what is already allowed in that space, what's the smelliest and the noisiest that's allowed in that space, and more or less say you have to stay in these boundaries. You know, we've worked with folks that need a ventilation flume. That's not even the technical word for it. You know, because they're making chocolate, right? Because there's fumes that come with that. Now, would you be bothered by having that next to you? Probably not. But so it's not always a negative thing in terms of fumes. So you have to look at it. This is also the reason, though, we always start by talking to the small scale manufacturers who are in the community, because we want to know who's there. We want to know what kind of businesses they have. And then we want to be able to have those conversations about what are the boundaries that we want for this area versus this area. Some things might need to go into an urban industrial area because of the noise that it's making. That completely makes sense. But the vast majority of them are going to, especially if it's a consumer-facing product or has some kind of consumer-facing interactive space, could be a great storefront. So we always start by talking to the business owners, no matter what.
Gotcha. Well, we'll just ask you a few more and wrap up here. Next question from Adam Gerardo, who's asking, what can local leaders do to convince landlords to convert existing larger spaces into micro retail space?
I think the best way to do it is to show them success. So we have real estate examples that we use from across the country of folks, private sector, people who want to make money, who've created micro retail space, who've created shared spaces, who've created all of these different real estate models that are incredibly successful. And so I think most of the time, property owners want to copy other property owners who've figured it out already. Most of them don't want to be the first one out. And so that's the best way. And not all of them are going to want to do it, but we want to find the people who we think are most likely to want to try something with us. And then we want to figure out how to help them be wildly successful to show proof of concept there. And that's why if we've already done our work, we've already spoken to a whole bunch of small scale manufacturers, we've already figured out what are the different kinds of real estate models that support the needs, right? The gaps that we've identified from those interviews. How can we help? Is it about connecting them up with a loan? Is it about connecting them up with the person who's done that kind of work in a different part of the country? People in this sector, one of the things I find most amazing is that people are sharing what they've figured out all over the country. And so people want to see other communities and other property owners succeed in this. And so I think that's one of the most important things that we can do with property owners is show them that it's possible, and then help them figure out how to actually do it. And provide some detailed support to get there the first or the second time out.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple more here. Michael Greenwald asks, how do you recommend squaring parking requirements with the size and limited footprint of these storefronts? And do you have any good examples that you could cite?
Yeah, so I was talking about the parking a little bit earlier. I mean, I think most of these businesses don't need very much parking. It really depends on your location, right? Especially if it's downtown. Hopefully you do not have any kind of parking requirements in your downtown, especially for small storefronts. I think anything that's a micro storefront, even under 1,000 square feet, shouldn't have any parking requirements no matter where it is. And these aren't places that people are coming and sitting and spending a long time. It's a shorter experience, or it's something that people want to experience as they're walking by. So I would really look very carefully at removing as much of the parking requirements, or all of them, where these businesses are, or if there's some kind of shared parking that they can take advantage of, either that the jurisdiction provides or that a larger shop nearby is providing that they can get in on. There's just not that much parking requirement. When they're scaling, when we're starting to look at dedicated industrial space of 5,000 square feet, that might be urban industrial, then folks need space for their vans or their buses or their shipping or whatever it is, and it starts becoming a little bit different. But it's no different than anybody else in an industrial area at that point.
This will be so go ahead.
Yeah, and I think, just as an example, I think Fairfax County, I think we ended up at one spot per 1,000 square feet.
Okay, thanks.
So you can look at that.
Okay, here's one from Julianne Woods, who says, we have studio spaces we created for local artists. Our board is debating whether yoga classes and spinning classes should be considered creative industries that could work well and pay the rent. Any thought on if this industry can help our downtown and arts community?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I'm sure they can lease the space, and I'm sure they can help bring energy. I think it's a question of how much space you want to give up to it. One of the things that we've seen in industrial space is that there's a CrossFit gym and filling up industrial spaces all over the place. So I think you just have to be thoughtful. Is it a percent that you're willing of space you're willing to give up to it? Is it a specific location that you want to look at? And then also, more importantly, look at why you're not getting artists or artisan businesses in those storefronts. What are the barriers to them? That's the question I would ask. If you're not getting the businesses that you want, and that means you're looking at yoga studios as a potential user, why aren't you getting those businesses? What are the barriers that they're facing? And going out and doing these interviews with small scale manufacturing and artisan business owners to understand what barriers they're facing, because you might need other forms of support.
Okay, I guess this will be our last question here from Mark Lundgren, and that
you
is,
keep saying that.
I know I keep saying that, but there's so many more, and there's so many good questions. And we always enjoy working with you, Ilana. I guess this is kind of tease up your work, and it can be kind of summary as well. Typically, what initiates your projects? How do you get involved in things?
That's a great question. So through Recast City, we work directly with communities all over the country. The major way we work with folks is through something called the Recast Leaders Program. It is a program where we work with 5 communities at a time. We train everybody up in the Recast Your City method within the book, but a lot deeper. We actually coach and mentor everybody going through these interviews and doing the small group discussions themselves, so they own those relationships and understand exactly how to do it so they can replicate it. And then in the second half of the program, we support everybody to start implementing their top actions. We work with everybody to create their own action plan, but then we support them in implementing their own actions. And the Recast Leaders Program is a 12-month cohort program. So we take 5 communities at a time into the program. We meet every other week, and it is all about helping those communities not only find the small-scale manufacturers, but really implement the work and start to achieve the outcomes that they lay it out at the beginning of the process. And so we're in fact just about to announce an open round of applications for Recast Leaders 2022. Can't believe we're at 2022. So if you're on our email list, or if you're interested, then you'll get it already. If you're not on our email list and you'd like to get information about it, you can email me. My email address is on the screen still, and I'll make sure you get it when the announcement comes out. But you can also check out more information about the Recast Leaders Program on our website, recastcity.com.
Excellent. Well, I'll keep to my word that was the last question. But just wanted to give you a chance to give us some closing thoughts here.
Just briefly, I would say that I'm really excited about all these questions, and I want people to understand that not only is this incredibly doable, it's happening all over the place, which I find so exciting to see. And the enthusiasm of people when they find these local product businesses, and the product businesses are found by the city, and they understand that people care that they have a business there, is really exciting. And the opportunity to really bring life back to these downtowns or to neighborhood main streets that have been neglected for a long time is really inspiring because people get to see their community in a whole different way. And you know, small scale manufacturing businesses don't solve everything, but they really do give people hope, and they really create opportunity for more people. And they give people a reason to be there. So I hope you'll look at them as a potential hidden gem within your own community. And I hope you'll consider buying the Recast City book from Ilana Preuss using the promo code SMART for 30% off. And definitely reach out. LinkedIn is the best place to see all of the cool stuff I find other communities doing as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Great, thank you, Ilana. And I'll second what you say about LinkedIn. Ilana's site is great, as is the site in general, about all sorts of things that are going on. So with that, we'll conclude our webinar today, Recast Your City, How to Save Your Downtown with Small Scale Manufacturing. I'd like to offer a great big thank you to Ilana Preuss for a great presentation, to everyone who attended today, and to John Coleman, our communications and technology guru, who helps to make this all happen. The complete recording of today's webinar will be posted on smartgrowth.org. Also, for those who have requested one, all attendees will receive an email that will contain a link to a personalized certificate of participation. Please look for this follow-up email if you need the certificate to claim other continuing education credits. When you exit from today's webinar, you'll be asked to participate in a short evaluation. Please take a few moments to provide feedback so that we can continue to improve the webinar experience for you. And finally, keep an eye on smartgrowth.org and your email inbox for details on other future webinars, including 2 next week. The first, which is the next installment of our ongoing fall series with EPA, Local Strategies for Equitable and Sustainable Transit-Oriented Development, which will be next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And on Thursday morning next week, our next Walktober Walk-in-R with the Maryland Department of Transportation. This one is called Pedestrian Safety Trends, Measures, and Solutions. So we hope to see you all there. And with that, I wish you all a great day and a great weekend.